Imagine buying a house for $800,000, you wire the money, and then just hope the seller gives you the home. Sounds insane, right? But here's the weird part. When you buy a home, you don't actually pay the seller directly. So where does the money go? Instead of paying the seller, the money goes to something called escrow. And escrow is basically the secret middleman behind every home purchase. It holds the money, the documents, and the deal itself until everything checks out. Without escrow, buying a house would actually be extremely risky. So let's break down exactly how it works. In this video, I'll explain what escrow actually is, why buyers and sellers both need it, and what happens to your money during the process. The easiest way to think about escrow is this. It's a neutral referee. When a buyer and seller agree on a home purchase, they both trust a third party to hold the deal until everything is complete. This third party is called an escrow company. They don't work for the buyer or the seller. Their job is simply to follow the instructions written in the purchase contract. They hold the buyer deposit, the loan funds from the bank, and the legal documents transferring ownership. Nothing gets released until every condition of the deal is met. That way, neither side can cheat the other. Once your offer on a house gets accepted, escrow opens. One of the first things a buyer does is deposit something called earnest money. This is basically a good faith deposit showing the seller that you have your foot in the property and are actually serious about buying it. Typically, it's around 1 to 3% of the purchase price. So if you're buying a $700,000 home, that might be $7,000 to $20,000. But here's the key detail. That money does not go to the seller. Instead, the escrow company places it into a secure escrow account. It just sits there until the transaction finishes. This protects both sides. The buyer knows that the seller can't just take the money and disappear, and the seller knows that the buyer has real money on the line. But holding the money is actually only one part of escrow. There's another reason escrow exists that's even more important. Before a home can legally change owners, one huge thing has to be verified. Does the seller actually have the right to sell the home? This is where something called a title search happens. A title company looks through the entire ownership history of the property. They check for problems like unpaid debts, ownership disputes, and recording errors or liens. If any issues appear, they have to be fixed before the sale can close. Because imagine buying a house and later discovering that someone else actually had a legal claim to it. That's why this step is so important. Once inspections are done, the loan is approved, and the title is clear, the deal moves towards closing. At this point, 3 things happen. First, the buyer sends their final loan documents. Second, the lender wires the mortgage funds into escrow. And third, the escrow company prepares the final closing statement. This document shows exactly where every dollar is going. Things like the down payment, property taxes, escrow fees, commissions, and insurance. Once everything is signed and the money's in place, escrow sends the documents to the county to be officially recorded. Recording is what legally transfers the ownership of the home. So once the deed is recorded, the transaction is finally complete. At that moment, the seller receives the money and the buyer officially becomes the new owner. And that's when you finally get the keys to your new house. So escrow might seem like just another complicated step in the home buying process, but it actually exists for a very simple reason. It protects both sides of one of the biggest financial transactions most people will ever make. Because when hundreds and thousands of dollars are involved, having a neutral middleman is probably a good idea. Happy house hunting!